Benito Mussolini, one of the most horrific mass murderers in history. Mussolini was like the oldest of 3 children. He grew up in a small village called Dovia, where his dad was a blacksmith and his mom was a school teacher. So his dad, he actually really hated the church, and he really passed this hatred down to his son. Mussolini has major issues following the rules. He works as a teacher for a bit, but he ends up getting fired from his teaching job for his bad attitude. Around this time, Mussolini was accused of So in 1902, he ends up moving to Switzerland to dodge the Italian draft. While he's there, he finally finds something that he's kind of good at: public speaking. Mussolini was considered a revolutionary socialist. For him, at this time, he was an extremist who believed in using violence to get what you want. And this type of talk ends up getting him arrested. People really start to respect him, all because he is passionate and unafraid to speak his mind. In fact, his speeches start to get him some attention from other revolutionary socialists. And some look at this time as the beginning of his rise to power. By 1909, Mussolini had moved back to Italy to a place called Trent. He gets a job as an editor for a newspaper called The Future of the Worker. After World War I, Italy was in shambles. There was no stable political system in place, and people felt like the government wasn't strong enough to solve problems like inflation and unemployment, which were at an all-time high after the war. Mussolini takes full advantage of it. He starts to churn out articles riling people up against the government. So around this same time, it's 1910, Mussolini falls in love. In 1910, he meets a woman named Rochelle. Mussolini and Rochelle, they fall in love. They quickly move in together. But when he asks her parents for permission, they're like, no. So I guess at this point, he pulls out a gun. He's like, I'm gonna marry your daughter or I'm gonna kill myself and her. And Rochelle and Mussolini, they end up getting married. Because in 1911, he ends up going right back to prison after getting arrested at a protest for clashing with the police. And then World War I breaks out, and he barely just gets out of prison, and now his ass was getting drafted. Basically, he starts to think war is actually great. It brings people together. In 1919, he forms a vigilante group, the Italian Fighting League. Forming this group is seen as the unofficial beginning of the Italian Fascist Party. So the Italian Fascist Party was all about extreme pride and loyalty to their country. Another core belief was authoritarian rule, aka having one single strong leader with complete control over the government. So between 1920 and 1922, Mussolini takes this group of his closest followers and they go around terrorizing Italy together. So he calls his crew the Black Shirts. But Mussolini is targeting anyone who speaks out against him and anyone who doesn't share his personal views. Mussolini's politics had inspired another up-and-coming extremist group, the Nazis. Mussolini sometimes, he was really into being a sex symbol. He loved it. And sometimes when he was being filmed, he would rip his shirt off. And around this time, he starts to go by the nickname El Duce, which means the guide or the conductor. With everything set in place, on November 9th, 1921, Mussolini officially transforms his loyal black shirts into the National Fascist Party. And he makes himself the leader. On October 22nd, 1922, Mussolini and 30,000 of his black shirts crew members decided to take the government by force. And along the way, they are causing a lot of destruction. And by the time they reached the capital, I guess they had killed around 40 people. The prime minister tries to impose martial law, which is essentially when the military steps in and enforces law and order during times of chaos. But the king of Italy, he tells the prime minister not to. He was worried that if they didn't give Mussolini what he wanted, there might be a lot more chaos. Finally, on October 28th, the prime minister and his cabinet resign. And word gets back to Mussolini. So he ends up going to see the king. He decides to make Mussolini the prime minister of Italy, which meant that Mussolini became the leader of the government. And 8 days later, Mussolini officially gained power over Italy. He launched big infrastructure projects. He built roads, railways, and even a new airport. He had newspapers and radio stations pumping out propaganda day and night, telling everyone he's amazing. And while Mussolini is living it up, thinking he's invincible, someone was getting ready to finally overtake him. One of his biggest fans was Adolf Hitler. And in 1923, just about a year after Mussolini ordered the March on Rome, Hitler decides imitation is the most sincere form of flattery. So he gets his Nazis to organize a march on Berlin. People died, and ultimately, Hitler was arrested for treason. So while Hitler's in jail, he actually writes his autobiography called Mein Kampf, aka My Struggle. But in this autobiography, he actually name checks Mussolini, calling him one of the greatest men ever. This comes across Mussolini's desk. Pretty much Mussolini ignores it. Christmas was a huge deal in Italy, but all this Christmas stuff seemed to really get under his skin. Now, he didn't ban Christmas, but he did strictly prohibit newspapers from mentioning it. He once said Christmas is nothing more than the 25th of December. So he decided he was going to replace traditional holidays with new ones that lined up more with his fascist agenda. So he finds the perfect person to replace Santa, or a perfect mascot, something known in Italy as La Befana. According to Italian folklore, La Befana was a witch who brought gifts to good children and lumps of coal to naughty children on January 6th. Which is kind of weird because it's still kind of like Christmas, right? He decided to invade Ethiopia. Technically, he wanted to do it because the government tried to get Ethiopia once before and failed, and it was considered an embarrassment to the country. He ends up doing it, and the invasion of Ethiopia was absolutely brutal. There were countless deaths. Almost 400,000 civilians were killed. Mussolini had his people bomb villages and used mustard gas attacks. He destroyed entire villages and farms, and the Italians even set up concentration camps in Ethiopia. I mean, it was awful. It was brutal, and a lot of people died. Between 1925 and 1926, there were 4 assassination attempts on Mussolini's life. One of Mussolini's biggest fans was a girl named Clara Petacci, and she would write him fan letters all the time. And then there was this one day where she's driving down some road and she realizes that Mussolini had just passed her car. Clara, she yells out to Musi, and Mussolini, he likes to have his ego stroked. And before you know it, the two of them are having a sexual love affair. So over in Germany, Hitler was about to make Mussolini regret ignoring his fan mail. By 1933, Hitler was the Chancellor of Germany. So he was in full control of the country. And on the day that he was sworn into office, Hitler writes a note to Mussolini. And Mussolini is just not into it. So a few months later, Mussolini gives a speech saying that Italy and Germany have the same goals. So in September 1937, Mussolini goes to Germany to meet Hitler, and it's a really big deal. So by 1939, there's an official agreement between the two countries to have each other's back. But it wouldn't take long for Hitler to break his promise. Hitler had promised Musi that he wouldn't invade Czechoslovakia, and he ended up doing it a month later. Hitler, he decides to invade it anyways, and he didn't give Mussolini a heads up, so Mussolini's pretty pissed off. And then Hitler decides to invade Poland. Now again, he had promised Musi that he was not going to do that. And around the same time, Italy loses control of North Africa. By 1943, it's becoming more and more clear which way World War II was going to end. And Italy here, they had a sense that they were going to be on the losing side. So around midnight on July 25th, the Fascist Grand Council voted Mussolini out of office because it was clear that Mussolini's alliance with Nazi Germany was not a great move. There were major economic problems happening in Italy, like food shortages, there were bombings, and widespread suffering. Many saw Mussolini as a liability rather than an asset, and they believed if he stayed in charge, it would lead Italy to more destruction. But as the council voted, Mussolini was sent to see the king. This time, the king stands up for himself and dismissed Mussolini as prime minister. And then, to top it all off, Mussolini was arrested, finally ending his 21-year rule. But then, because the story never ends, out of nowhere, Hitler comes to his rescue. Hitler uses multiple planes to send in dozens of soldiers to break Mussolini out of prison. He wants to set Mussolini up as like his puppet, controlling the northern part of Italy. So he does just that. He puts Mussolini in charge of northern Italy. Mussolini gave speeches and tried to play the part, but if he didn't do a convincing job, then Hitler would invade the rest of Italy. So he decides the only thing he can do is like get out of Italy. So he and his mistress Clara, they decide to run away together and leave everything behind. So, on April 27th, 1945, Mussolini and Clara reached Lake Como when suddenly they were recognized. They get caught. The people who caught them sentenced them all to death. So the following afternoon, on April 28th, Mussolini and Clara were executed. The wild part is that their bodies were taken to Milan and left in the town square. They hang Mussolini and Clara's bodies, their dead bodies, upside down. They spit on Mussolini's lifeless body. They threw things at him. Finally, American troops stepped in and ordered the bodies to be sent to the morgue. And then whatever was left of the dictator was buried in an unmarked grave. Now, Rochelle, Mussolini's wife, she survived the war on her own just fine. And then one day in like 1966, she's minding her own business when an envelope is delivered to her home. She opens it up and inside was a piece of human brain. And it was like, what? And she finds out that it was actually a piece of Mussolini's brain. American soldiers, they had taken part of his brain to be studied. Scientists wanted to know what the brain of a vicious dictator looked like. So they did. And then they sent it back to her. His brain was, quote, average.